Someone wrote in and asked, what was the wildest theory you've ever heard regarding Western religions, Christianity in particular? And I said, yeah, there's a lot of wild theories out there. I mean, you can get off into the weeds real easy. I don't know why a lot of religious people are as crazy as they are, but some people need religion and it doesn't really work out for them as well as it could. But what we do see in religiosity is something called dogmatism, right? You get a bunch of people that think they know more than everyone else, like the priestly class, and then it becomes like a monopoly on right and wrong. And they don't tolerate off-key messages, and I give them, I think that's okay. A lot of, see, Americans and Protestants and everyone else, they think, well, that's not good. But I do believe that a priestly class is better than just somebody who picks up an old Bible and thinks they know what they're talking about. And that's what a lot of these big mouth preachers are at this time, that are just in it for the racket. They're about, I mean, to me, I cannot watch them for even more than a minute before almost flying off the handle, because it really is sad. Because people are looking for religion, and they're the people that think because religion is some type of interpretive thing that they can just say any old thing and pick out a couple of verses and put on their little show and collect the money. And I really hate that, because that's really the antithesis of real religion, which is an individual practice which must be holy, and you must make it holy. And your religion should not have principles that are counterintuitive. Well, I wouldn't say counterintuitive. That's okay. Counterintuitive can be super normal, right? That's sort of what good religious principles are, but counterproductive, that's sort of it, but not productive. Let's just say, well, counterproductive in the sense that your religion produces defilements instead of purification. For example, getting into fights with other people over religion, that is about the worst thing you can possibly do. If that's your damn religion, your religion stinks. That's not what the Buddha taught. And the Buddha is considered, I mean, you could consider him a religious person, you consider him a philosopher. But he certainly was a man. He taught for 45 years. And it's all pretty well documented. Whereas when we come to Christianity, all of a sudden things start getting foggier, because there is no real historical evidence that Jesus ever existed. Now that right there is going to get people's backs up, and they're going to get defensive, and then that could be a fight unto itself. I'm just saying what archaeologists say, okay? At this point in time, where we have a lot more information that they had in the 19th century, where a lot of people thought they knew everything, sort of like in every age, people think they know everything. So religion attracts a lot of people that want to be right. They want to be right. So they want to know what's right, and then once they know what's right, then they're going to tell everybody what's right. But oftentimes, they're mistaken, and so their wrong right view is what they have. Or right wrong view. I mean, it's a right effort to want to be right. But a lot of them don't get there, but they think they're right. That's the delusionality concept, component. And then what do they do? Well, guess what? They commit bad deeds. They say bad words, and they think bad thoughts based on essentially what is a bad religion that they think is good, that people tell them is good. I'm a Christian. Well, what? Oh, really? What do you believe? Well, do you believe this? You could give them 20 questions and you'll be like, well, I don't believe in that form of Christianity. Well, that's not Christianity. You see how it can get like that? And it's really sad. I really feel for a lot of Protestants out there that are lost. Catholics too. Catholics just have more or less the rituals, the rites and rituals down, which I like. I prize them. I also like their more priestly class, although these days who knows what that is, because they're subjected to Overton window pressures, as we have seen, and there's a lot of governmental interference, such as on the Russian Orthodox side, where they're just straight up and down phonies. You think, government overreach wouldn't work. Well, maybe it's the government, maybe it's NGOs, maybe it's some other orchestrated sabotage that is given social, political, economic cover, right? There's a lot of other religions that hate Christianity to the bone and also don't feel like it's a legitimate religion. So they don't feel like they should have any restraint because they don't consider anything about your religion holy in the least. In fact, they think it's apocryphal. So burning down your church, that's actually something they get off on. They whiz if that happens. It's a proof to them that what you believed in was nonsense and what they believed in was better. And these things are going on. These are sub narratives that are happening in a multi-capitalist kinds of societies where, of course, everyone's presenting themselves to be way above and beyond that, but of course they're not on a day-to-day basis, and they prove it. All types of murder statistics, slavery, dispossession, mass violence. See, that's all inconvenient truth for the bright-sided fools, the cattle that is just supposed to get feed, right? Info feed. Throw them a handful of corn like you would hogs, and that's just supposed to tide them over. But real information where you could put together a couple things that then all of a sudden things don't make sense, policies don't make sense, people don't make sense. They don't like that. So a lot of these narratives, they're really sanitized, they're really stupefied, and of course we don't really have a dedicated priestly class. We don't have monks, we don't have abbeys, we don't have people devoted to good practice, good religion, of which bookishness is maybe just a small part. Like right now, you could get a Cliff Notes of the Bible. You could put like their good precepts on 2 pages, and if you studied those religiously, you'd have what you needed, not the whole dang thing. Okay? Especially break it down for, you know what priests did? They broke it down for the simple people so it would be an effective religion. If you don't do that and you stay academic, you keep pushing people into bookishness and playing competitive games, that's the antithesis of good religion. Keeping it simple, stupid works for religion too. Which brings me to Moses and his 10 Commandments. They say Moses was... Well, first off, we have to think of the context. Moses was in Egypt. Egypt had the pharaohs. The pharaoh was a slave driver. It was a slave society. And guess who was enslaved? That's right. Some tribes from Mesopotamia at the time. And Moses, they say, was a believer. He was a priest of the pharaoh, but he was a believer in Amunism. Like Amun was a heretic movement within ancient Egypt where one of the pharaohs decided that everything revolved around, the sun was the main thing, Amun. And then after a generation or two, it fell out of favor and they decided to just get rid of it all. Like remove it as the state religion, as a heretic or apocryphal. And so they got, the theory is that Moses was a believer of that sort of sect. And so what did he do? He didn't just want to go himself out of Egypt. He said, all right, all you slaves, you know what? I've got the true religion. I'm a priest, and we're going to do this, and F the Pharaoh. And so he split off with some of the congregation, some of the slaves, some of the rando Mesopotamians that were captured by Egyptians on jaunts through different parts of that part of the globe at that time. And yeah, Amun, there you go. You see that pyramid structure, the leader, the priest, the son of God. Yeah, God of son. Sort of all mixed up there. Now, another theory is, well, we know what happened later. I mean, Judea was established. It was a colony of the Roman Empire. See, I'm fast forwarding here, but this is what I consider to be sort of the pivotal moments. It became a colony. It was subjugated, and you had Persia, just sort of like Iran today, although it wasn't Muslim, it was Zoroastrian, or run by the Magi, who were ancient Persians who had their own religion, which was more Zoroastrian influenced, also influenced by Buddhism as well. Let's not forget, Buddhism is 2,500 years old, so 500 years older than Christianity. But within those 5 centuries, there was a lot of trade going from India, Silk Road, China. China's Buddhist, was Buddhist, by the way, which should tell you something. India was Buddhist. So being that that was in the Middle East, you had caravans and everything else going from east to west. And so there was also Buddhist influence within the Magi or the Persians at that time, but they had a hostile relationship with the denizens of Judea because they might have been taken as slaves, or as we know from the different stories, there was a lot of wars in that region. So there could have been some bad blood. In fact, there was between the two civilizations and their religions. I know a lot of people won't believe me on this point that there was contention at that time, just like today, just different players involved. So the theory is, this is a wild theory, okay? There's no way I could prove this to anyone, nor do I necessarily believe it. I just think it's an interesting story, so I'm going to tell it. So the theory is that the Magi wanted to cause problems for Judea, which was a colony of Rome at that time. So essentially they cooked up the story of Jesus and organized the cult around him via the apostles. And where did they send them? Well, they sent them to Ephesus, which was a Greek colony, and Rome, because those were the most important places at that time, and they wanted to create division within Judea itself, which would sort of explain why Jesus has sort of an there's a story of animosity. I mean, the story does discredit the priestly class, or cast the priestly class of the Jews in a bad light, which is why there's been bad blood between the two religions for a long time. Now today we say the axes are buried, and I hope that's true. I think it's a really stupid thing to fight about those things. Like, if you it can turn into a memory war, and I'm against memory wars. The Buddha, he said, you know what the past is? The past is BS, okay? You weren't there, it wasn't you, so relax. And I do believe that is the right way. So religions can turn into memory wars, especially if you're talking about stories and fables that happened or supposedly happened a long time ago. Now, Jesus himself, if we're talking about the Magi, we're talking about Zoroastrianism, we're also talking about Odinism, and we're talking about Buddhism. Those were sort of the influences. And within the figure of Jesus, along with, of course, some of the legends that the Jews had, because they wanted to sort of split their prophecy, like by saying the prophecy had already happened, and in this way discredit them in metaphysical terms, if that makes any sense. Sort of try to divide up their religious cohesion and also represent them as being villains, more or less, co-conspirators in the execution of the fulfillment of their own prophecy type thing. So the theory is it was an early psyop by the Magi against Judea. But that doesn't mean it doesn't have religious, it's of no religious value. I just said Odinism and Buddhism are two things that are pretty valuable on their own. They're legitimate Western religions. And even the things like the pharaohic traditions that were incorporated into Judaism, or you could say, are Western as well. So it's not a bad thing. There's a lot of wisdom, accumulated wisdom in the Bible. I like the story of King David too. I do. So why can't I pick things to that I like? Why not? Things that are beneficial, things that are instructive. But yeah, of course, Proverbs is Egyptian. And the book of Job is Therapeute, which is Buddhist. So again, it was a collection of holy text because Judeans were scribes. They collected the good stuff and put it together into like one book for their priestly class. So, yeah, that's sort of it as far as religion goes. So, what does that mean for religious practitioners today that are Western? Well, guess what? Buddhism it got a bad rap. It was misunderstood for many years in the West. That's a whole repository, especially Western Buddhism. Because it does have a philosophic tradition, you can also take secularist, psychological elements and also fuse that into, let's say, Theravada Buddhism. And then, of course, Odinic practices as well. You know, being on the cross, the tree of life, you see, they have all of that too. So, as we know more, again, this is a theory, but as we get to know more about those other things I just mentioned, if you could make it more practical and less academic, you can have amazing and magical results in your life. And that's about it. And that's how you say sort of non-dogmatic. You can also throw some Taoism in there. That can help out. That's like the anti-dogma element of world philosophy and religion. It's like everyone else wants to be a hard ass, but the Taoist, there you go. That's the side that gives you just a little bit more leeway to get to the right place, even if it takes you a little bit longer to get there. Because that's another problem with Protestantism and whatnot. It's just so dang hard on people. And they end up, like they say, this guilt complex, that's not a joke. You feel bad because you're not living up to something that's dogmatic. I mean, it's a sadistic way of thinking. And a lot of it's misguided and it's not being called out because People are stuck in these systems, they're stuck in these communities, and they're stuck in this way of doing things, and they're not going to listen to anything else. They think, a religion that was devised by the devil or something like that, which I understand too. People should not be too open to so-called new ideas. I think people need to be very cautious what they believe, especially Christians or any other religion. For example, a lot of religions have the narcissistic personality disorder built into it that they equate with godlike directives. And we know, like, to be a godlike person, you have to think like you're a god, sort of thing. You're the son of God in a narcissistic way. That's not helpful. That's actually the wrong direction. That's going in the wrong way. Narcissism I want to thank all secularists or psychologists for at least doing the research into that. Narcissism is a terrible disease, and it's very widespread, especially among religious people. It explains dogmatic religious people to a T, like cult leaders and everything else. What was the other thing I heard recently? They called it borderline and antisocial behavior. My God. I listened to someone just read 5 minutes about it, I was like, how did they know? And then I thought of all these names and places and faces. I was like, how did they know them? It's like just a general descriptor for certain people that we all know, and just didn't know that they're of a type, they're of a kind. How valuable is that? See, if we have the religious principle of avoiding foolish and bad and evil people, being able to spot them, wow, that's like putting on thermal vision, right? In the dark. It's like, whoa, there we go. There's a little rabbit over there. There's, it's a bear. let's run, right? That's some very valuable insights. All these personality disorders. Certainly for avoiding fools, but if you have them to some degree too, and you have a little bit of introspection, then you can think, wow, this is how people get caught in unskillful ways of thinking and acting. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to be on my P's and Q's. Because again, narcissism, everybody has, all these things are spectrums, right? Everybody has a little bit of it. Little kids have it. So adults have it too. But that just makes it normal, doesn't make it good. And certainly people that don't have it, they're super normal, they're better. They're more philosophical, they see things in a bigger way. And imagine that, somebody steals your cloak, and you're just like, okay, whatever. You need it more than I do? Okay, here you go, take my damn cloak. There. See, didn't the saints do stuff like that? Well, that's another thing. Our saints, they were monks, a lot of them hermits, because they went out into the wilderness to do their spiritual practice, and they did become holy thereby. Because they didn't have distractions. They didn't have people coming in and saying, where's my frying pan? You hit it, right? They didn't have people like that around them, out there in the wilderness. So they became wise to what was going on in their minds and souls and whatever else, hearts and minds. And they filtered it out. For example, why am I aggravating myself right now about something? Nobody's around here. Look at this. I can scream, I can shout, I can do a cartwheel through the desert. Nobody cares. Why am I beating myself up about that load of timber that fell into the Mediterranean? Why am I still thinking about that? And then you'd see it finally, and you'd be like, wow. But see, if you were doing the 8-day work week, like a lot of Westerners are doing, you don't have that time for peace and quiet for reflection and purification and letting things go that just keep adding up over time, because we're living such unskillful lives with so many unskillful people doing such unskillful things with such a worldly focus that can't go right over time. Usually, see, this is the thing with, they call it a midlife crisis. Usually, see, as a kid, you can be pretty much tricked into the worldliness of worldliness. But once you hit midlife, you see basically everything life can throw at you, or at least half of it. And that's enough to wake most people up, and they just don't know what they should do at that point. Like, wow, this life I've been living is completely meaningless. And I've had a lot of association with just terribly misguided, horrible, bizarre people. And what is the point of life, right? Like people struggle with that. And this is where I don't believe, I'm not on board with the psychiatrists where they try to, normalize unskillful living in some way just to keep you going. I'm not really on board with that. I understand some people have to stick it out for social reasons. Like there's people out there, I've heard, there's so many different stories. Like some guy's brother is messed up and he doesn't want to be working the job he's working, but if he doesn't, his brother's going to starve. And and so he goes to work every day, even though he really hates the whole situation. So, but there's a lot of people like that. But the monks, the real deal, the guys that, maybe they came back after a trip and their whole families or town were destroyed. Everybody murdered or died of the plague or something happened. There was an earthquake and they were freed up from those social responsibilities. Well, they took the practice to like Olympic levels of skillfulness, to the point where people recognize them. These people are saints. Like they're beyond the normal realm. And they went to them for guidance. They would try to find them if they had problems, serious enough problems. And some of them stayed with them. They became devoted to their practice. And then it sort of grew and it became sort of codified and people understood it to a lesser or greater degree in different places at different times. But of course, that it's all tenuous because we're talking about people here, talking about understanding, we're talking about geopolitics, we're talking about a whole bunch of different things. So, for example, if you look at these old cathedrals or old abbeys, they were more civilized and better than what we have today, at least in terms of the authenticity of the teaching and the practitioners therein. But we don't have it. It's wrecked. We just have the ruins. We have the legends, like the legend of St. Patrick. All the saints. You should go through all the saints. Because that was another thing. Rome fell. There was a lot of different people trying to interpret what Christianity was. And it was at least a little bit of religion. Now, people before that didn't really, a lot of them weren't exposed. Because the disciples targeted Ephesus and Rome, a lot of more people were exposed to it than, for example, the Odinists that were out there in Kazan and up through the riverways there, or the Buddhists that got cut off in India, and the Greeks that sort of got wiped out too. I mean, the Greeks sort of did their they sort of figured, they did the worldly mistake of thinking that they could think themselves out of religion, which is sort of a mistake. We don't, if you're not happy, it doesn't matter if you know about deep space. Okay. And I mean, happy, that's maybe overdoing it. If you don't know how to be content, if you don't know how to cool yourself down, if you don't know how to keep coming back to focus on the good things and to drop the bad things, it doesn't matter if you know about deep space or not. It doesn't. In terms of lived experience, quality of life, it doesn't matter. But see, our schooling system doesn't see it that way. They think it's more important you know about deep space than you know about a religion, which they think is screwy anyway. Because they're coming out of the same school that, knowledge is power, power is good, but, the Buddha, he didn't really see things that way. We can become deluded into thinking that power is good, but it really isn't. Especially if it's power to influence worldly things. They're subject to change and randomness. You've got a palace somewhere. Who cares? The Buddha had a palace. He left the palace. Right? He had all the dancing girls he could have possibly wanted, and he went into the jungle instead. A lot happier. Spent 45 years living his best life instead. Okay. So his life was also proof that his philosophy was sound, his religion was sound. And his religion was sound because they were based on psychological truths. Just like I mentioned, that borderline personality, that exists, whether you want it to or not, and you will see it. Like, there's 100 people, maybe 50 have it in some places. Well, if you can see it, man, you know exactly what's going on in their minds. If you can't, guess what? You're going to think that's normal. Talk about a living hell. There's people living in that hell right now. They have no idea that personality types like that exist. They're wide open for predation, disappointment, everything known to man. So that's not something religion should do. It should not bright side you from the world, but rather teach you skillful interaction, such as also a skillful retreat from it. Or as some people like to say, advancing in a different direction. That's what you can think of it. Instead of a retreat, learning how to advance in different directions using spiritual insights, spiritual practice. Because you don't have to go anywhere to practice spiritually. In fact, it's counterintuitive, but counterproductive to go some places if you're doing spiritual practice. So you can be in whatever monastery you are right now. Wherever you are, this is your monastery. That's where you practice. So get it quiet, get it holy, get it separate from that outside world, which can be so crazy, so random, and so cruel, full of craving and aversion. Just, you got to make those separations. And then look, you could have your little shed, your little shack somewhere, your little cave, and that's where you practice. So from the outside, the worldly person will be like, this person's not doing anything. But no, actually they are doing a lot. They're training. They're engaged in holy practice. But the Patujana, the worldly, they don't see that. They're out there in that soup of causality, and they want things, they crave things, they desire things, and they're deluded about those things. So I wouldn't say wait till midlife crisis to develop religious skills. It would be much better if you develop them beforehand, but for those people that hit that crisis, it is there for you, but you will have to practice, and it could be harder for you because a lot of people get stuck in unskillful ways of living, and it's a lot of work to get out of that. It's a lot of work to cut ties because you're already at a disadvantage. You've lived unskillfully and ignorantly for so many years, it's hard to break bad habits. Bad habit. Has anybody smoked? Anyone picked up smoking out there? Can I see a show of hands? Raise your hand if you picked up smoking at some point in your life. Look at all those hands. Oh my goodness. All right, now how many of you stopped smoking? Now put down your hands. Uh-oh. The hand's still up. What? It's only a few hands that went down. See that? A bad habit? Bad habits are hard like that to break. You get into the dancing girls, man, I'm telling you, there are guys. It's like putting a hot dog on a string in front of a greyhound. That's about what they're doing, run themselves ragged all day long, all week long, all month long, all life long, trying to catch that hot dog. And they don't ever catch it. Okay? Maybe for a while. Maybe they bite a couple of pieces off, but they don't get the whole thing. Because why? That's craving. Craving is a defilement. You're not going to ever get it. You're not going to ever get enough. You're just going to get enough to keep you hungry. It's the hunger that's the problem, not the hot dog. Okay. So if you can dislodge that as the greyhound, you can run free. You can leave the racetrack. You can relax in your kennel, right? Lick your wounds, heal, develop an interest in the clover all around you, right? You can go down to the stream and jump in and then sun yourself on the bank and just not have any of that trouble. But yeah, people get mixed up in all types of things, and there's all different types of reasons. So again, if you've made mistakes, forgive yourself right now. Why? Because I give you permission to do it. Do it. And you see why I have to do that? Because there's hard people out there, they will not give themselves permission, even if they know they should. That's why the priest, the holy man, whatever, is important for some people, because they're missing just that link. They just can't do it. They can't do it. They're not built that way. They're not built for making mistakes. They're not built for admitting mistakes. They're not built for self-awareness. You know, self-awareness is a skill. Like, to figure out what's really bothering you, it's not the person you just knocked out that was the problem. Okay? It's not the person you're blaming right now that's the problem. It's a subconscious problem. It's something that's eating you up that might have happened a long time ago, or it's a cumulative thing. That's why people explode on the wrong things. So self-reflection, taking the time to sit down, to breathe. Like a horse that's out of control, you got to give it time. You got to give yourself time to slow down, and you have to develop self-awareness as a skill. See it as a skill, but in the beginning it's very painful, oftentimes. But if you stare through it, then you say, all right, look, I'm done. I forgive. I forgive, and it's done. And I'm taking the agency. I can't go back in time. I can't keep that person from firing that artillery shell. But I can forgive. Someone wrote in and asked, can you talk about these fake right people a little bit more because I'm starting to see that. I said, thank God. I'm so glad people are starting to see it. Yeah, you know what really tips it off is the buffoonery. They always go too far because it's part of their political science methodology, political operative methodology. Well, they're the politicians, so they have to be in front of the issue. So what's the issue? Well, if we want to make a far right look like a bunch of idiots, then we need a bunch of people saying a bunch of idiotic things, like throwing different things together and just going overboard so that the whole position looks ridiculous. That's a discrediting. The net effect is to discredit a fake opposition, so it's essentially political straw manning. But of course, you need political operatives that will do it, and those are the people that are on the take. They're working for some puppeteers. It could be an NGO or a group of shady individuals or self-interested groups, lobbying groups. That would be fascinating to know how far the lobbying groups have actually gotten into commandeering political actors, essentially, because there's really nothing political about them. It's like there's some type of, they're really like an actor, like a film actor that has a bunch of people trying to give them things to say or positions to take for money. That's what it's devolved into. People think that's normalized. That's not normal. It's subnormal. That's the crappiest type of political culture you could ever have. That's the culture that we're going to discontinue. Should have never got started in the first place. Certainly 2024, probably worst year ever as far as that goes. And it's all over the place. It's not just the U.S. See, there's this thing called, what do they call it? Illiberal democracies, right? It's like a fake democracy, simulated democracy. We're on a spectrum, right? There's real democracy and then there's illiberal democracy, and it's tending more towards illiberal democracy if you have lobbying groups and just stagehands. And essentially that's what democracy can be degraded into if political leadership allows it to happen, which they usually do if they're captured before they're even allowed into the process in the first place. So in my case, that didn't happen. And in the place of real leadership, it doesn't happen either. So, but you have to be on the lookout for these phonies and their ridiculous statements, and then the cadre of infomercialists that frame them within the context of their political ideological mappings that are also toxic frames that mean essentially nothing, but for them it's just a convenient way to keep things in their court. So it's a psychological framing, so psychosociological framing that works for them, but is imbecilic on a strategic level. Essentially, as far as a criminal mindset can go, which is high functioning, tactical robbery, but the strategy falls apart. This happened in Rome, okay? This happened in a bunch of different empires. England, we got to add the British Empire to that their whole rotten class. And basically anywhere else. I mean, India has a long history of that. Pakistan, all of North Africa, where else? Yeah, basically this is the most dangerous thing that can happen within government administrations is that you get these high-functioning tactical robbers and bandits that are just using it as a front for diverting resources. You can tell real leadership because they not only think strategically, but they act strategically. And they also are aware of the charlatans and their operatives and their gambits and gambles. Now, see, in permissive times, they're more out of control, and also because they do have conceit. Like a malignant narcissist does believe they are the smartest people on the planet. So I would say they've never been as out loud as they are today. They think they have a monopoly on the game. So it's really sort of weird. They don't understand this disparity between their supply, narcissistic supply, and the public. But it's there. There's a division. Like, they look like total smacked asses, don't they? They act like them too. But because they're the only thing in town, they think, the only monopoly in the country, then they still just don't get why people don't take to them. Like when the polling comes in and it's like below 20%, they tell the staffers, or some of the staffers that know their malignant narcissists better, they say, yeah, fudge the numbers. Put 87.7% down. And that'll make them happy. Something like that, right? There's, they have these diviners that are around them, like, I don't know, what about 86%? No, stop that. 85? It's going to be 87, all right? What about 97? Come on, don't, it depends. I'm sure there were like African dictators that would not have been, or Haitian dictators that would not have been happy with 87.7%. They needed the 97% or higher. Was that Papadon? Yeah. So it's all around the world. It's a personality trait or behavioral condition. But again, when our electoral processes weren't game like this and you had a free press, they got booed out of the forum. At least in good times. In bad times, they might have had their thugs take care of the competition, which is something malignant narcissists consider to be standard operating procedure. So you go back in time and look at Caligulas and things like that, you can see sort of what our modern versions of that are capable of. And they're damn yes people that have run the country into the ground. Yep. What time is it on that left-handed watch? Oh, it's 0 Fs. Yet again. So it really is incumbent upon the public to be a little bit more informed about these things, and also have a little higher standards as far as who and what they allow to tax them to death and boss them around. Because I can say as an American that what they call American culture today is not what it is. So you got another skunked word. I like the skunk words. When I say going to the drag races, they think of dudes in dresses instead of those machines that burn the tires and head down the track at 100 and some miles an hour like they did in the 70s, right? But now you got these educated fools, these little slimy, sarcastic people filled with bad humor and vulgarity that think they can somehow be the dominant definer of words in this type of skunked mustard gas-like cultural environment. that they think is really cool, and make sure that they had the final say so on, at least for now. Let's hope those days are coming to an end. Can I get a hallelujah out there? Yeah. Oh, that's a loud one. That those days are coming. I like to think their days are numbered because my bill, the one paragraph that is against lobbying, they'd be going to jail. They try that under a new administration. Them and their entire company, their entire families, everything. You're going to mess up the political process. You're not going to come out here and debate the points and subject yourself to public approval. You've got some type of dual strategy. F you and your whole clown circus. Everything about you, wherever you came from, mommy and daddy. All the way back to the beginning of time. Nothing about you is anything worth a damn. In fact, quite the contrary. Essentially, a form of democratic athlete's foot. Pull them sneakers off, smell. Oh. It sometimes has that sweet, sweaty. Think, oh my goodness. Sometimes I overdo it, but it helps to make that comparison because they really don't get it. What they do get is positions, and they get it the wrong way, and what comes out of that is a lot of wrongness, which is why we've been down this wrong road as long as we have. But those days are coming to an end. That's my hope. It can happen. It's not something anyone needs to tolerate. It isn't. If they sweet talked you into thinking that, or headlocked you into thinking that, break free. Because that's the only way it's done. They get you in that headlock and just take you down that road. They're not taking you to a good place. Not you, your children, the culture, anything, economy. They really are one trick or two trick ponies. So don't feel bad about excluding them from any type of social function. Nobody has a right to mess things up that could be so much better without their malign influence. But yeah, people rationalize everything, don't they? That's why the prisons are almost exploding with a bunch of people that think like that. In fact, they've changed the culture to reflect their bad values, so the whole culture is now just moving towards that criminal cliff of the Day of Swords. So if that's skillful, I don't know what is. But there certainly are a lot of people here that think they know more polished sticks than you could shake a stick at. But that's not talent, is it? The talent to deceive. When was that a talent? Who would consider that a talent? So yeah, life is a journey, but that is the craziest theory I heard, and but it opens up a lot of new doors, doesn't it? And again, your spiritual practice has to be your practice. My practice, like I was like a Thai boxer in the jungle, just punching and kicking a tree for days on end until the splinters flew and the tree fell down. That was my practice. Okay, that's how much I had to practice to get through what I was working through. And I just keep that practice today, but I'm not hurting myself anymore. And the practice is good. I don't have to knock down trees that way. I can just shadow box. That's quite elegant when it suits me, and I can also stop when it suits me, because I'm not really fighting anything, am I? And life is a journey. You are different at 120 as you are at 15. You just have to accept that and embrace that. At 15, I was mowing lawns for $5 a lawn. And I thought that was great. That was the model. I couldn't think of anything else. I thought that was the best, and I had a great time doing that. At 120, you know, left that behind. Don't have a lawnmower, don't have a lawn. Okay? So, at least that's how old I feel. I sometimes think in dog years these days. That's part of my practice. Sort of left time behind too, like at least being on the clock. A lot of people still on that clock, aren't they? Look at your clock. How much time do you got? Maybe you only got 2 minutes. Someone wrote in and they asked, "Is that true? You fell down 1,000 oak stairs?" And I'd say, well, I found out recently somebody's used the term highly sensitive person, HSP. See, these psychologists need to have groups to understand, um, let's say, sensitive people. Yeah, they have this norm, like everybody should have 100 IQ, like these bell curves. It really is a concept of a norm, which is imposed, but guess what you forget when you focus on the norm? Well, you forget HSPs, those highly sensitive people that might complain a lot because they're highly sensitive. It's just they don't know how to really accept a less aggravating way of life, because our normal lives, or at least the normal Western lives, are way more hectic than we're built for. You see, we're coming from the free countries. We're coming from magnificent, majestic forests. We're coming from coastlines where our ancestors just looked out over the sea and did a little bit of fishing here and there. They were not on a 40-hour work week, okay? But that doesn't mean they didn't do great things. Actually, they did legendary things. How about all those fairy tales, Grimm's fairy tales, all that? You have time for creativity. You have time to write a book. You have time to experience things more deeply. You have time to accumulate skill. You have time to practice whatever you're doing in a zazen kind of way with Satori, okay? Because it's a combination. It's a mechanism like that. So, but the suffering, the real suffering, like I said, I was coming to that, I talked about that midlife thing, where you have the feeling, the suffering, that combined with the ego, right, the concept of self, that you have gone as far as you can go in a worldly sense, and it's not going to get any better than whatever KPI you set for yourself in a worldly sense. It's just going to get worse. Even if that's something like, how about youthful enthusiasm, right? That's sort of unquantifiable. That's not just materialistic. And the body changes, like from, instead of having extra energy, you teenagers that are jumping around, don't know how to control yourselves, when you get older, when you hit that midlife thing, it shifts, right? It's like driving a car. You need all that energy in the first and second gear, but then you get up and you coast. Well, then after a while, like friction starts kicking in. You slow down. You can't drive just any old trail. That old pickup is not going to make it. Don't try it. You got to slow down and figure out what to do next, because you're not going to just slam the accelerator on the floor if you don't have to. And you already figured out you don't have to. You know where that hill is and what's beyond it, and it ain't no place you want to go. But then you're left with a feeling of where then next. And so really what it is it's a sign that you need to develop further, but you just don't have the skills to do it because our social norms don't offer alternative paths, or it's within a state of ignorance you might not be aware of the holy path, which is the holy path of our ancestors is well trodden. There's a lot of souls that were on the holy path, and it was accepted, it was considered respectable, and it wasn't these types of organizations that don't make a lot of sense. There were just a lot more local, and sometimes you would have local talent, sometimes you wouldn't, sometimes you might have some more regional talent, but there weren't these games being played, certainly not these psychosociological political games, which have gone so far to corrupt and defunct religion because they don't feel it's necessary. In fact, it might be something that's blocking them, but who's they, right? Well, it's not your type of people, it's some type of fifth column, right? They don't tolerate it in the despotic core either. But they do have the appearances that it's still working, right? But not really. Sort of only so far. So that's what you can call a hollowed out type of institution, and people feel it, that's why they're not there. They go there, it's this sort of weird social games and a hollow message, and they don't go back. It's like going to a movie theater. A movie stinks. It might be a little bit of variation, but it's not something that's uplifting or entertaining or good in any way. And then you have the psychologists, but again we know that they're mostly worldly people working for worldly reasons, including power and manipulation, that they don't see a problem with because they're schemerists and egotists. And also don't care. There is a hard component of people that just don't care. Just like doctors that don't feel the pain of their patients, psychopathy in a useful sense. In some cases, if they can have a dispassionate relationship with the patient, that can be beneficial. But it's also an open door for power plays, and there's certainly that contingent in the academy at this time. And the results, just horrifying. Anarchy, essentially. But if you're dealing with dupes that are out of their league and have politicized themselves in positions of responsibility, these types of strategic oversights are really easy to make, and they've made them. But because they live in a double-think kind of existence where their alternative reality makes them the good guys, they're sort of invested in that narrative. So they don't like change, but they also don't really tolerate an opposition on fundamental matters like that, like the futurity of your country and its well-management by allowing native leadership access to the administration instead of cartelism. So that is sort of a fundamental rejection of their model, and their players and the people that fund that and orchestrate that. So unless you know that's going on and they do like keeping people in the dark about that or deny it's happening, then they might be able to perpetrate that for a couple more months, which is fine. Like again, if you can rob a bank once a month, they'll do 7 months if that's as long as the public will tolerate them. But why should the public tolerate people like that are just working for themselves with ill intent and bad results? Is that what the public should do? Is that what democracy was all about? Who's the bad guy here? The person using adjectives and speaking clearly, or people that have some type of agenda that they will not let themselves change their minds on? for the benefit of us all, especially good feelings, relationships, times, atmospheres, like, cheerful, light vibe with no agenda type people that they aren't. So it's unfortunate they got on that train, but they can also get off that train. And if that train we can put on our station, do not stop here, because we're just chilling, right? We're relaxed. We have no agenda except good faith, high ethical standards, and realistic, discernible results that are good. That's it. As effectively as possible. How's that for straight shooting? Who's against that? Raise your hand. Oh, there's the two people in the back. Here, yeah. Take note. Because really, they have been in power the last 30 years. So you know exactly what the next 5 years are going to look like. Or maybe you don't or can't imagine how bad things can get in the next 5 years if you don't start getting some people with some different values, some different ideas of doing things differently. Because more of the same can get way worse. Like when the electricity goes out as the next thing. Because that is a contested thing in places that aren't run right. Because they do their smoke machine until the lights go out. And then even during the lights going out, they do the smoke machine. And then after the lights go out, then they come on again, then they go off again. Then, just like the prices at the store or the deliveries of potatoes. But they always got some type of explanation for that. Because they're socialists, that's their whole job. But don't question the fundamentals, or get people that aren't like that in, because then they got a problem with that. So that's how they've been operating. So do you think in the next 2 years with that same type of management, things are going to get better? Yes or no? I'm going to put that straight up to the public. Let's have a poll. Now see, in that case, I do believe the poll that says 87.7%. They don't believe it's going to get better under that type of management. That's when I believe that. But see, they like to play those games too, don't they? Like yes, no, like this, and everybody. You see how disrespectful that is to the public? And yet these people are just like you and me and everyone else, except they're way greedier. That's really the only difference. Oh, and care less, right? And are really big into winning things by doing things, but a normal person wouldn't do that, would they? So must it be terminal? I don't think so. I think it's just sort of like a condition that can happen given certain circumstances, right? What do we have? A chance of randomness. That's it. Nothing more than that. So maybe a couple of chances and a couple of randoms will finally swing things the right way for a change. Why not? Right? The 1920s, they were way different than the 1890s. And nobody knew really why. Okay, so the next 10 years can be like an inspiration for the rest of humanity for the next 800 years, because something sensible was done for a change, quite unexpectedly so. So like surprisingly, shockingly, surprisingly so. Somebody figured it out and did something about it. And then just embraced the change. It wasn't a battle. What is it, a battle of wits? Nothing more than that. Who's the Wizard of Oz, really? It's not me. Not yet, at least, so, but it could happen. Some film directors actually got funding for a film, and then they turned that film into a magical piece of cinema. And it exists for us in this time. We can access it. But that didn't happen by accident. But in bad times where money is being burnt like sawdust in a furnace, then I guess that doesn't happen, does it? So is that this time, or can this time be that time? Can we make it happen? Who's got money here? Where's the money? Who's got money? Why? Why don't they have money for this? Why did they got money for the old stuff, like those polyester suits from the 70s that have been sitting around in some warehouse forever? Is that what you want to wear for the next 10 years? Come on. People got money here. Who's got money? They don't got money for that? It's crazy. People got no taste, no style, no nothing, no sense in their heads. They might have sense in the pocket, but they don't got sense in their heads. That's what's what right now. But again, that can change. Tomorrow is another day, right? All of a sudden, where did that 1,000, a million, billion come from? Oh, I guess I just pushed a button, right? My own damn button. But it's not mine, right? I can't turn this society around by pushing a button. You have to do that. Each individual one of you has to do that internally, spiritually. That's where cultural renewal comes from. Not from some big mouth with big ideas and a big button. So put in the work, chomps, before you start pointing fingers. I was watching a recent panel discussion on why LA is the bubble that it is and how the left has continuously failed to make any sense to normal people. But again, this is usually just half of the story. Like if you take the left at face value, like how they present themselves as a legitimate part of democratic politics because they say so, you're already at a disadvantage. It's very easy for academics to discern where the left contagion came from and what it actually means, and also who's backing them up geopolitically today to the tune of billions of dollars, and also how they think and operate. The Bolsheviks were a minority party that were willing to do anything to stay in power because it's about power politics. It's not about equity or sharing or anything else. It's a damn takeover. And you know what they don't like? They don't like bourgeois people that they call bourgeois, which is a ridiculous label, which is anyone more talented than them. That puts them to shame because they have malignant narcissistic characteristics. It's all about them. Everyone else doesn't get it, doesn't get them, isn't giving them supply. They're the enemy. So you could be there doing your job and not trying to ignore their nonsense, but they won't ignore you, right? They want to have some type of revenge. Yeah, see, we come back to Nietzsche and raisonnement. See, let's call them the raisonnementeurs. They want revenge. They want power. That's it. And the result looks ridiculous. Everyone hates their films, but they got paid and they're living that life. So who's better than you? They wouldn't throw a bucket of spit on you if you were on fire. They like watching you squirm. Right? They have a big component of sadism. And there's different forms of sadism. I recommend everyone look into it. Like one of them is spineless sadism. That's very common online. Like social media mobs, troll farms, water armies. Yeah, it's a form of sadism. But there's another one that describes them to a T. There's like 4 different forms. It's essentially the whole leftist program. So here's the thing. They want to present themselves as legitimate, that they studied, that they came to those conclusions because they're them. Well, that's ipso facto an admission that they should not be included in civic society, civil society, systems based on reciprocity, cooperation, dignity, and respect, because they aren't bringing any of that to the table. They're bringing power plays, schemerism, and revenge, sadism, right? That's when we start getting into four bad qualities, right? Usually it's psychopathy, narcissism, and Machiavellianism, but they add sadism on top of that. So that's it. So you want to talk about their legitimacy? No, wait, they have a reason for existing. Well, go back to 1917 and read about that year from unbiased sources, and then come back to me again and tell me you still believe that. Because if you do, there's really nothing to be said for you. But that's the problem. They have this whole propaganda thing going on. So what type of mental deficiency is that? Gaslighting. Yeah, they got the gaslighting in propagandistic. They turbocharged their gaslighting via propaganda. Propaganda is essentially gaslighting. Look here, we're winning the war, and in reality, you might not be, but that's what you're putting out there. You're gaslighting the public because you want something that works for you. So all of their propaganda is some form of gaslighting. For example, sadism, revenge, power plays, and everything else. So what is their veneer? The veneer is that they were heroes of the labor movement. But guess what? That story, upon closer inspection, doesn't check out. In fact, they were the subverters of it, the derailers of it, the cheats of it, the dead ends of it. And they're a big part of this damn class conflict where there should be no class conflict. Class conflicts are ridiculous. It's based on misperception of some sense of superiority. When, in fact, no, that's not true. You see, you have 2 feet, 2 hands, a head, 2 eyes, nose. Yeah, you're exactly like other people. You're not an extra special deer. Okay, there are some deer, like elk, have the antlers and whatnot. There could be, 8-point bucks. Of course, there's differentiations, but essentially, you're part of the same species, part of the same genus. And so your overblown conceptuality of yourself and your psychopathy towards others is a psychological defect. Something that if you apply spiritual practice to religiously, you can get rid of. You can advance out of that. But if you don't put in the work, if you don't see a problem with yourself, if you pick up a convenient political philosophy that lets you imbibe in all of your defilements to the hilt in real life, well, then you picked the wrong path, didn't you? And that's the way good society, civil society, needs to understand the whole leftist movement. That does not mean that the right, or what is presented as the right, or the fake version of the right, or the hystericized version of the right is the only thing left in the room, because it isn't either. Because everything's been captured by the left, essentially they've just been strawmanning a fake opposition for the last 30 years. Didn't exist that way, but then they want you to adopt that so they can fight you effectively at some type of disadvantage, because the position isn't congruent or it's ridiculous. Yeah, let's hate people from all over everyone, not like us. Let's go and beat them up. That's not right. What? So that's why I say we got to get out of this right-left thing. But the left thing is useful for people in the West because it connects the dots back to where it came from. It was a completely artificial imposition on democracy. For example, Jefferson and Andrew Jackson. What part of Americanism does leftism have from the standpoint of Andrew Jackson? Well, let me tell you, 0. So they're American and they're leftist? I don't know. I would say they're contaminated with a foreign ideology, is a way of putting it. And essentially, you can find bottom feeders, right? Instead of the top 5% of your society, the bottom 5 gets to decide things in the framework I just explained. Now, when you present it that way to a wide spectrum of healthy, balanced individuals, they see that for the wrong that it is. But if you have the power players and schemers in play that will also deny that, like malignant narcissists will deny to the grave that they are one, then you see the problem you're dealing with, especially if they get a crew together, like a gang of criminals, cultural war criminals. Then you can see how monopolistic they can be. And of course, it's not just in the arts where they stand out like a sore thumb because their products are so demeaning and ridiculous and horrible. But everywhere, politics, economies, they're all over the place. Like I said, messing up business relationships between management and ownership and the workers, they're right there in the middle, messing things up, being the arbiters for the workers that probably aren't anything like them. The only thing that gave them a little bit of power was that they were so hateful and determined. And that's what was sort of needed in some relationships, because the good people that were getting worked to death didn't have the energy to put up a continuous campaign against the ownership. Okay? But ultimately, what did they win for them? Maybe they got a few breadcrumbs off the table, but essentially they might have killed off their industries because they pissed off the managers and ownership to the extent that they did. Because of course these people don't stop. They keep going. Like, they can't just have one film company in Hollywood. It has to be the whole thing. Otherwise, they got to figure out some lawfare or other schemerous plans to get the competition out, because otherwise, again, nobody buys their crap. But if they can take it all over at once, then it's just some type of inverted cultural norm where everyone's crap at the same time. So everybody feels like they're crazy, like normal people, but they don't. They feel quite satisfied that they're not being put to shame, because they have shame. And they want approval. They want that supply, but they're not getting it because someone else is getting it, because they're better. And then they have to think up a bunch of rationalizations why that is, which becomes a projection, because obviously the other side is scheming and monopolizing things and excluding people, because that's what they do, or what they would do in their position. You see? So essentially they have a form of mental illness that is both undiagnosed, turbo boosted, and politicized. Hence torpedoism, right? They're program primed, ready to go, and they got those subconscious processes producing all of that bile, all of that enmity that they're not dealing with, because it's on a subconscious level. So it has a political component, it has a psychological component, and its effects are devastating, absolutely devastating, worse than devastating. They're sadistic. Yeah, the results are sadistic. The public becomes the whipping boy for their revenge fantasies that they act out on the public. Because of course it's the public that's wrong. The public wasn't smart enough to understand them. They weren't good enough to understand them. And then they get into these self-rationalization circles. And a lot of it is based on identity. Like, they can't be the thing they want to be. Why do they want to be that? Well, that's irrational. They're envious, they're jealous. They should just accept their station in life, not cut out for it. If I said I wanted to be, the baseball player at the World Series, look, I know I'm not good enough to play at that level. I accept that. I really like watching them play. Well, not professional sports anymore because that's been skunked. But just as an example, how about race car drivers like at Formula One? Now, I can drive a go-kart pretty good, you know, but that's a whole different level. And so I accept that. I'm a normal person. I'm actually happy for the people that are really doing amazing things at a level that I'm self-aware is way higher than what I would be capable of doing in their shoes. But they don't have that. They just want, they can't get, big baby throw tantrum. Big baby start blaming. Big baby smash. And these are essentially adults. They can be as old as they come, right? That it doesn't matter. That's one of the problems for people, especially young people, but also older people. These are psychological conditions, and a lot of people just don't grow out of the narcissistic what do you call it? Evolutionary development. They don't. They stay there. So you're dealing with a grown-ass person that sees things that way and hasn't put in the work and doesn't see the point in putting in the work. And if you point it out to them, they misinterpret it as criticism, which is something that's extremely painful for them because they're looking for social approval and validation. And so who's the enemy then? Your good advice is seen as an attack. And they react like you would hit a dog in the face with a barbed wire whip, right? It wasn't meant to be that, but that's what they use on other people to keep them away from criticizing them. So it's like a self-defense mechanism that they feel almost as if it's an existential threat that you criticize them because they're in that whole external validation loop. So, yeah, it's a contagion, right? It's destroyed countries. It's destroyed countries for decades. Like I would say, again, historically, the last 30 years will probably be considered the lost decades in film, and it could easily turn into 40 years. If you look at Eastern European countries that were occupied by military dictatorship that was followed by leftist regimes, their arts and sciences and everything else just fell off a cliff for that time. So 1945 to 1990. But see, that's the Eastern Studies Department that most Western rubes, especially not leftists, that's not the version of history and events that they get. They have their little supply stooges send them fake narratives about this and that, and they'll believe that because it's put in terms, ideological terms that they've long since signed off on because it works for their defilements. These are not enlightened people. They're the opposite. Right? Enlightened people head towards spiritual enlightenment, towards self-actualization, which becomes no self, which becomes the holy life, which becomes detachment from the defilements, from all the worldly strivings, from just pure performance without worldly considerations like power or fame or anything else, supply. They're just doing it for the sake of doing it well. Like they're practicing archery just for the sake of archery, not because they want to scheme to get the Olympic gold, right? Or if they wouldn't even think that way because they don't think of archery that way as some type of social ladder or power dynamics. But the other side does. And so if you have to interact with those people, then you can go, they can easily turn things into that lowest common denominator, which is really, really, really annoying. It's very off-putting. they create these toxic atmospheres for people that aren't like them. And then they wonder why nobody wants to work with them, except stooges, essentially. Yes, people, step and fetch it. So I think in terms of social maladaptation, we're talking about people that have been boosted up, that came from some type of subnormal stratum, that feel just like someone who's impervious in a restaurant sends back the lobster because it isn't quite what they isn't warm enough. That's sort of essentially you have these people out of very low spectrums of society that misunderstood the thing they were envious and jealous of, and then turbo boosting them in power positions, and that this is essentially how they act. And of course, because they're so smart, they know the other side did everything they would have done in their position, but essentially they're polar opposites, but they won't admit that, because being the good thing is what they believe themselves to be, especially when they're attacking or driving off the good things. So that's when we come back to delusion. Gaslighting leads to delusion. They're trying to spread delusion amongst others, and that's coming from, you can't deceive others without being deceived. So how delusional would you have to be to engage in gaslighting activities? Well, the answer is extremely delusional. And that's the type of people the left has, which is why they believe in tropes that are manifestly a pack of lies. You know, and it sounds trite, but what country that have they taken over where people really want to live in? If they had all the facts, would they really want to live there? And the answer to that is no. People leave countries that are run by these types of personalities impersonating political platforms. They essentially set up like a hegemon, a dictatorship, a personality cult that's phony. Phony as they come, but people that play along with it, well, they're in the government, right? Don't play along, you're out. You're in jail. You get a fine. Somebody knocks on your door discussing the adjectives you use, because it could have offended someone's glass ego bubbles. The supreme leader can't be wrong. The narcissist can't be wrong. The hangers-on to the narcissist can't believe that they're wrong. Can't say that they're wrong. See, double think. But sometimes they slip, and that's when the hammer comes down on boom, squish, squash. Not tolerated. So it's unfortunate. Like I consider it, I've equated all of these cultural war crimes like spraying people in the face with mustard gas. These are deeply disturbed individuals and classes of people, and their operations and their method of operations are essentially cultural war crimes. What I've described as the profile, the mental profile, the political profile of a cultural war criminal. And you think, well, you're just talking about the USA and the UK and the Commonwealth, where they're very active at this time with their cover stories and presentations and gaslightings. Well, not really. I'm addressing Eastern and Central Europe that actually knows what I'm talking about. They know. Like right now, there's like nobody. They're looking at me like with their hands up and their shoulders. Like, why are you even taking the time to talk about this? Like all those refugees, the people who left Russia in the last 2 years with whatever they could carry on their backs. They're like, their hands are up. Like, what is this? Why is this even interesting? What you're saying here? But the stupidest of Americans, Britishers, Irish, Scottish, wherever, they don't get it. Like, what? No, 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 no. There's just left and right, and this is the paradigm. And of course, they have their place, and their ways of operating are just as good as other people's. But that it's just not true, is it? It's not true at all. And also, don't get caught on labelism. If they find out that the word left sounds bad, they'll reinvent them. They'll just pick another label for themselves and continue essentially the same psychological method of operation that they have used and are using now. It's just convenient to see them within the context of the left. They have that historical causality to them that's irrefutable to people that know what they're talking about. But be advised, the academia of the Western world is shot through with a gaslighting, misrepresenting, narcissistic, sadistic personality types, helped along by their friends and allies that were such big business partners. Starting in 1990, all history ended in 1990. They wanted to reset their global relationship, where the West had dropped its defenses and they just ramped up their cultural, political, socioeconomic, and political assaults, like sending in like stormtroops in civilian clothes and setting up business deals. Just look at the trade data. Anything coming out of China versus when did that start? When a bunch of idiots got flipped 1970 from. They didn't change. Their whole system was exactly the same. Essentially, they just had a bunch of mouthpieces come out and say whatever the other side wanted to hear, so that they could get what they want. And they got it. Look at the world global trade. It's undeniable. These idiots are living in an alternative reality. But of course, that can happen if you're in a bubble yourself and don't believe yourself to be, because your information space is cooked by the same type of gaslighting people. Have these romanticized notions about the places their ideas came from. Next time you see a Che Guevara t-shirt or a cap or a hammer and a sickle and a star, and people think it's just cool or edgy or normal, your culture has failed, right? Your academics have failed. Your leaders have failed to understand what that is. You failed to recognize it for what it is. Che Guevara absolutely was a terrorist and killed countless of people. Look at the people now, the 95%ers in Cuba, just running around like chickens because they keep turning off the electricity, the 5% despots at the top. Right? They don't even bother sending them to concentration camps anymore. They're just like, all right, go. Here, you see that water? Start swimming. Get yourself an inner tube and go for it. They just have dropped all pretenses of political platform. It's just outright despotism with Cuban characteristics. But again, when it was all kicking off, they had that gaslighting going and people were apt to believe them. But now they got a track record, don't they? Still, you find these dense people wearing this stuff because it's propaganda, isn't it? And they do like that. They're big into that. They take that very seriously. They think it's an assault on them. If you send them something true, they feel like you're doing the reverse to them. They do the Potemkin Village type stuff. So when Khrushchev went into the American supermarket in the 50s and everything was stocked with great industrial products that Russia at that time could easily have produced if they had a different government. He thought they had Potemkin Village him. In fact, he got mad. Took off his little shoe and banged it. Bang, 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 bang. Stop messing with my mind. Stop making me feel inferior. This is a lie. You're lying just like I do. Bang, bang, bang. By the way, there's a great film out. I like to complain about films, but The Death of Stalin, look that up. It might be some type of series. That is great. The acting in that is great. The uniforms are great. The writing is great. That film will not be canceled. But you know what? They're trying to cancel that. You can't access that in Cuba, okay? Can't access that in China or Russia or North Korea or wherever they don't want it to be accessed. They're probably going to try to get it canceled in the West at some point if they can do it, because it's mocking their heroes, their false gods. It's like putting something out that makes Moloch look bad, and they're cultists from Moloch. They're going to try to torpedo it somehow. But until they do, yeah, watch that film. That's also the way you shoot films. I think that film is something that could go into film school because it's done really well. And it's funny. It's a terrible, I mean, a lot of people, when they even think about those times, especially people from Eastern Europe that were brutalized by that regime, or the Russians themselves, like Solzhenitsyn, like shivers go down their spine, like their hair stands up if they know what they're talking about. Right? That is not a funny topic, but they turned it they put a lot of humor into it. And at this day and age, you know, with people that weren't directly brutalized by that group of hucksters, you can get some distance from it, and you can see it in a humorous light, because that can be part of a healing process. But of course, people that are still invested in the fake narrative, the alternative reality, that is like taking a hot iron poker and sticking it straight up their butts. That's the type of pain they have, the cognitive dissonance they have when contemplating the big phonies that they still believe in to this day and will not repudiate despite the evidence. So, look, we're talking essentially, I don't use the term cultural war criminal lightly. Like, there has to be a deed. Like, you produced a crappy film and foisted it off on the American public. Yeah, that is a cultural war crime. So people associated with that, they get hit with that. Because again, let's not forget, it's not just that they produced filth, stupidity, and annoying, sadistic things. They took that opportunity away from a real film that didn't get shot, didn't get casted, didn't get produced, isn't there, because they took the infrastructure over in their schemerous way, their power politics schemerous way. So they're contagion. It's like, again, I keep coming back to the rash metaphor. You don't negotiate with a rash, you just cure it. And my hope is that at some point they will find God, that they will turn over a new leaf. I really do wish that for them, but why should anyone else entertain their perfidy and think that they're being fair? Because it's not really the definition of being fair. Fairness is reserved for fair people. And for people just professing to be that and aren't, that's the difference. You have to be able to make that difference. If you're not making that difference, you're a sucker, and you're suckering yourself, and you're suckering society out of all the good things it could otherwise have if this blight was not shot into all corners of the Western world with ill intent. Like, I don't think that they thought like they were going to be doing everyone a solid, because I think they think that politicians do that to be schemers themselves, because, right, it's always about the shadow projection, because that's the way they think. They think, for example, all of our heroes that we took the time to build statues to remember, they want to cut those down. They want their own, they want themselves on that. They don't believe the story. Like Captain Cook taking time to address scurvy amongst his ranks, they think that's a lie. That's how they would lie about themselves. So cut it down. This is an affront to our sensibilities. So yeah, people that are that misdirected and that amped up, they're a detriment. There's nothing really you can do with them until they change themselves, and we can't wait for that to happen. So that's why the filters need to go in, and if they've taken over an institution, it needs to be completely redone. There's no negotiating with people like that, essentially. People that are just in it for the power grab don't need them. And they're not just in culture, they're in industry and they're in politics. So it's even worse than a lot of people want to admit. But at this late stage in the game, I sometimes lose my patience with people that are just pretending that they have any shred of legitimacy at this point. They never had it. Okay, so they think they have it, they don't. So you're essentially dealing with a delusional person, like an alcoholic. It's like, yeah, no, I can still do this job as a sawmill operator. I can do it. Yeah, you're just a hater. You don't believe me. They make it that personal thing. But look, you're just out of the game. You're not. You're a danger to yourself and others, and you're not aware of that fact. So you're that much more dangerous. You have a problem. You have a problem with leftist ideology. You have problems with psychology. You have psychological problems. Now, do realize narcissists, like they are, they'll try to use that too. They'll say, no, you're the pathological one. You have authoritarian personality disorder. You're just trying to take this away from us. Otherwise, we would have it, see? So they're in psychology too. Yeah. They go all the way down to that level. Why wouldn't a malignant narcissist do that? That's essentially their whole game. It's everybody else's fault, unless they get the supply. And that's what they deserve because they think so. So, see those loops like that? We're dealing with loopy people. And why do we have so many of them? Because they got into the education system, cultural institutions, politics, and they want an alternative reality, and they create an alternative reality in the form of their monopolizing of places and toxifying them. To the point of exclusion. You're not on board, canceled. That's it. Boom. No. When Stalin was crossing names off the list, how much resistance did he have doing that? Well, none. He was totally congruent with his own self, which is all he cared about. So essentially that's it. So it needs to go to bed. It needs to go to rest. It needs to be treated as the dangerous and terrible thing that it is. Associated with a dangerous group of liars and schemers that will stop at nothing from taking the top spots with their apex fallacy way of seeing things and create those conditions, manifest those conditions that they manifest in this world if you let them, right? Seeds, here we go. Take a bunch of kudzu seeds and scatter them in your garden, because that's what you're going to get if you don't weed them out. But see, again, they flipped the script. Who are they weeding out? The people that aren't kudzu like that. So at some point it becomes terminal. You have a bunch of factories that are dotified, and they ride it out till they're gone. Wealth guarding, status guarding, whatever they do, till the end, till the wheels fall off. Until they can completely control the entire information space to just be a supply mechanism for them. So you can see bad governments take on bad psychological characteristics, whereby the king, the real one, he frees the people. He doesn't enslave them. He protects the people from predation. Think of it in a metaphorical sense. Don't personalize it. Don't make it worldly. How about higher than a king? Your guardian angel with his gleaming sword and wings. He's there and slays all the bad thoughts, all the brigands, all the defilements, all the desires from sticking onto you and taking you down into the hell realms like they're going. So your guardian angel will not let you succumb to their depths, but if they don't have one, they've got a devil and a pitchfork instead. That's their direction. There's nothing you can do about that. This is their dimension. Not everyone's getting saved, but you're certainly not doing any good thing by boosting them up or helping them or working with them or treating them like you would a good person, because you're really just deluding yourself. And that's not good, is it? So I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. Hate it. Everybody hates it, but nobody's figuring out how definitive you have to be in order to have the good things. So simplify it, right? You can have a hardware store. If the community goes south, that hardware store is going to get ripped off and robbed, and then there's going to be no store there anymore. And that's what they do. They focus on the things that work and things they want, and then they take them and wreck them. I think Haiti is a great... Just keep those cameras rolling. Go there and let yourself see where that leads to, because that's sort of what anarchy looks like in modern times. We're going to take over the plantation and do it better than they did. But then they don't end up doing that, do they? But they think they can do it until they don't do it, and then even when they don't do it, they're still going to, do it somehow. If they could only do it, but they never end up doing it. So you want to stick in that group and try to figure things out in a group therapy session? Good luck. But I don't think a lot of them are going to find God this time around. That's just my assumption, but of course, some people would consider me a hater for saying that, but probably not 95% of the Haitians that know what I'm talking about. Can I get a hallelujah? Oh, look at that. Oh my goodness. That was loud. Yeah, all the good people getting screwed over there because of the bad people. See, it can happen anywhere, amongst any people, at any time. And there's good people and bad people all over the place. We know it's true. So, but of course, people that are crazy like they are, they would say that me just saying that you shouldn't be able to say that in their company. This doesn't fit their narratives. Cancel you like that. Oh, Mr. Truth Teller, hello? Yeah, HR wants to see you. Okay, click. 5 minutes later. You're terminated. You can get your stuff, put it in your cardboard box, and goodbye. They put a little golden star on the wall. It's like covered and golden stars. Meanwhile, the company is being run in the ground. So when they launch their amphibious operations, that your people have like butter knives and instead of something that would stop them. Works globally, right? Works locally, globally, all over the place. Less things, the more ridiculous your country looks, the better they look. So if you got people like rolling out old tires, set them on fire, living under bridges, shooting up dope, they can sleep easier at night, knowing how much more superior they are. That you allowed their agents of cultural decline into the positions of responsibility that they have usurped. And they don't care how deluded their agents are. They don't. The more deluded, the better, right? They're fighting for a workers' paradise. They're getting revenge on the bad people, they think. So, yeah, this was discernible going back. I'm going to say, when was it discernible? I would say in Germany in 1954, it was discernible. And then you just have to go through the Eastern European countries. I mean, Russia was discernible in when? 1917? So there's people so far behind the curve that they don't even know what they're dealing with, essentially. And there's just so many damn dummies in the West. I'm ashamed on many levels for how stupid Westerners are outside of Eastern zones. I am ashamed. But I understand that they got gaslighted. They're not given the information that would lead them to basic conclusions about history and the bad actors they're dealing with and their shtick, their poly shticks. So it is what it is, people. So I want to wish you all a blessed day. I don't think evil will triumph everywhere. I don't. So look to the lights of the world. Be a light to the world and increase your light. And there can't really be light without darkness. If you take the spinning disc style, yin and yang, this is what it is. So people get up, take over things, and then things decline and collapse, and then you can rebuild. That's the way I look at it. A lot of cities, I really look forward to just completely rebuilding cities that have been destroyed and doing it in a very methodical, logical, practical, good way. I really look forward to that. Now, I might not get there because I'm absolutely and utterly hated by the other side. I've been dehumanized, depersonalized. I've been declared the enemy. But who cares, right? You get up in front of a comedy club, you can kill it, and still 10 people are going to want to beat you up for being as brilliant as you are. It's just the way it is. This dimension, it wasn't meant to be perfect. But we can do what we can within the scope of what is possible. And we can also practice and not put our focus on the externals. If that doesn't ever happen, that's okay too. It wasn't meant to be. Someone else might do it. Someone else might get closer to what I'm talking about. But there's no guarantees. They could push the nuclear buttons tomorrow. And if they feel like they're in some type of existential threat, which is a misperception based on their delusions, they'll do it anyway, no matter what we do. We're provoking them. They're provoking themselves. They're seeing shadows on the wall, attributing them to us. We're dealing with lunatics. So maybe your expectations are too high. So I have no expectations. I have no desires, no cravings, no nothing. I don't need to prove anything. I don't need supply. I don't need fame. I don't need money. The only thing I do now is practice. And practice makes perfect, doesn't it? Or close to it as you can get, which is a lot better than being in a swamp like we have today. That's a great thing. You can get out of a swamp. Just you could have like a force field. I like the 1 meter force field. It's like a circle around me. I can be anywhere. I could be in a battlefield, but I've got that circle of holiness and practice around me. I'm practicing. Other people are losing their minds. I'm practicing. This is just a new level of practice. Here I was standing right in front of a building. The whole building caved in, just like on its footprint. Didn't get a scratch, right? An hour later, the dust settles. I turn around, it's blue sky. Nothing was there in the first place, really. Just forms and conditions. No attachments. That's this realm.